What is going on, Movie Meals? Movie Meals. Hey, it's 80 degrees out, sun's out, guns out. You know what I say? We're bringing the old tank back, showing off the Naruto tat. That's what we do. We're never going to be YouTubers who are making consistency. That's never what we do around here. We get on when we have an opportunity. We like chatting about movies, TV. Somehow this podcast has hit 47 episodes. That's pretty incredible, even with some breaks. Yeah. Fighting through the plague that was my last year of sickness. But let's get into it here. First, I guess we'll start thanking Movie Meal patrons, Kimberly, Karen. If you want to be a patron, go do that. You know, we're not big enough to really care. It's pretty much nobody. But Kimberly, Karen, we appreciate it. Get some merch. The hoodie's way far away, but we're still gonna give a hoodie away. To a fan who's been commenting. Once we cross that 2,000, we're actually really close. So like, comment, subscribe, and share. We're at 1967. Okay, 40 more, something like that. A little less. That's all we need. So help us do that. Why I had it on. Yeah, big things are happening. We're going to start with Furiosa. We both did see it. We tried to get a review done. Both just got busy and forgot. So, Kyle, what were your positives of Furiosa?
That it's awesome. No, this movie ruled. I loved that it took us almost on an odyssey of sorts for the character of Furiosa, seeing her and how she became who we know her as in Mad Max Fury Road. It's definitely not the same type of journey, as I mentioned before. It's more of an odyssey as compared to Mad Max's previous story, which was like point A to point B, simple and to the point, but also back to point A again in a sense. But this one, I like that George really liked this character so much that he really wanted to do her justice in making her have like this grand epic for the audiences to show like what he sees as like a special character. Because if you felt that to begin with in Fury Road, but this one, I think he takes it up a bunch of notches in terms of what he really appreciates about that character. And I think he also, something about it also felt a bit personal at the same time. I can't quite explain what it is, but when watching Furiosa and seeing like how the movie was structured, and how like the violence, for example, was a bit more nihilistic compared to even like the last movie was, in my opinion. There was something, it almost felt like he had like something to get off his chest, which I don't know if that's really the case or not, but it just came across that way. And I kind of appreciate that it almost, in a weird sort of way, tonally felt different from the previous movie, despite aesthetically feeling similar to the previous movie. Not completely aesthetically, but still enough to where you feel like you're back to where we were 10 years ago with Fury Road. And I also thought that Anya Taylor-Joy did a terrific job as Furiosa, but the young actress who plays an even younger version of that character, we should look up her name for that.
I'll look it up right now.
I thought she did a terrific job too, and she had way more screen time than I was expecting, which makes sense.
Yeah, she does.
In the marketing, you just see Anya all over the place, and really, it was more of the other actress's movie than Anya's, if you kind of want to think about it that way. But both actresses were still fantastic. But the biggest of shout-outs for me was Chris Hemsworth as the villain role, where he's menacing, but yet he's also stupid at the same time at doing what he's supposed to be doing. Like, he has a menacing presence and a very entertaining one, but I appreciate a villain that wasn't necessarily cunning, but was kind of just pretending to be cunning, but you could just see through him and like his fakeness in a sense. And when you see his journey parallel to Furiosa's, you as an audience member start to realize that more and more, similarly to the character of Furiosa as she's growing up in the process. So I really like that juxtaposition between those two characters. Hemsworth's performance was great. It reminded me of like him doing like an evil but really slimy type of performance that we saw at with the movie Bad Times at the El Royale, which that's a more underrated movie. People should check that one out if they haven't. But I'm hoping to see more roles out of him. I'm hoping people in the industry recognize that, funny enough, like he can be a leading man, but he also can be like a character actor who's not afraid to get weird with it. So this is like one of my favorite performances of his by far. But I've rambled enough. George did a great job with the action. The movie was awesome to watch, especially in on IMAX. So I was glad I was able to do that. Alex, I'll hand it over to you now.
The actress's name is Alea Brown.
Thank you.
Um,
Terrific.
yeah,
Terrific job.
I loved Furiosa. I don't get some of the hate that this movie is getting. I think it's awesome. I think it's as good as maybe not as good, but just slightly next to as good, as Mad Max. It does take it's interesting because I think where some of the very few criticisms you got about Mad Max is that there wasn't story. There wasn't story. It's just action. No story. No story. And then George goes here and he keeps the action and adds more in depth. Here you go, spoon fed story. And I'm still hearing complaints. What are we doing here? I think this movie was awesome. I thought Anya Taylor-Joy was fantastic. Man, she's got the biggest eyes in the game. And there were so many close-ups of her eyes and so many cool shots of with how big her eyes are, just seeing the white of the eyes as she opens them in different scenes. She was excellent. Yeah, Chris Hemsworth, we know he can do weird and wacky. They took Thor in that direction because he's good at it. Bad Times at the El Royale is really good. It's very underrated with him, and he does get a good villain shtick that really showed that he could do this. He's great in this. The ending that Chris Hemsworth has is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. The ending of this movie is fantastic. Mm-hmm. It takes you in a direction where I'm like, oh, is this like an anime for a second? Are we talking about life and all these incredible things? Like, this is insane. The ending of the movie is really, really strong, as well as all the action, all the performances, all the stunts. I thought was excellent. They even kind of made a Morton Joe a little bit more of a character than just this villain chasing them. They added more to him, which was interesting, and we got to see more of the world, more of this apocalypse, and I really loved it. I don't really have any complaints. I saw it in IMAX as well. We kind of got the short end of the stick on our seats because we got seats a little late when we finally figured out what time we were going to be able to go. And we were so freaking close to one, like two sound systems and then one directly behind us, just where the boxes were. I thought my right eardrum was going to explode. It was so loud. It just happened where we were sitting. But I loved the movie. I don't have any nitpicks, no negatives. Do you?
Not necessarily. There's some mentions of like things that happened in between time or places that we got glimpses of, but we didn't get like enough to really dive into them more that I kind of wish we could have. But I'm also not one for like lore type stuff anyway. I'm in there for the journey. I'm in there to see like how the particular story unfolds, and that's what these Mad Max movies do for me. They take me through for a ride and take me for more of like a journey rather than like all of the lore related type stuff. So it's not a huge bother for me, but there was some cool stuff that was sprinkled in throughout Furiosa to where I was like, I wish we saw a little bit more of that, more than like glossing over it, but it's already
slight spoilers. What? What are
movie.
you talking about? Give me slight spoilers if you haven't seen it. The movie's been out for a week. Give me just quick without giving too much away. Like, you talking Gas Town and Bullet Town?
Maybe those places. The Paradise Place also I wish we could have gotten more of than just a glimpse we saw at the beginning. They mentioned like the war that went on, like the 40-day war or something like that. Like it was a really cool shot of like how we saw like moments of the war like passing through time.
Yeah.
Like that was a really creative shot and I really liked it, but at the same time, like you're just so like something about watching the movie in real time just made me want like a little bit more of it. But we already like have such a long enough movie to begin with. It makes sense to not worry about it so much. Like the point is just to have the context of what's going on through her journey. So just stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't need any of that. Didn't even have that thought, that feeling, because I was watching a great film. But yeah, no, I don't really have any negatives at all. I thought Furiosa was excellent.
That's great.
So we'll transition into this. I know Kyle and I, we were having a heated conversation about it. It's a big topic right now. Movies are dying. Mad Max Furiosa has shown that movie theaters are completely and totally dead. We've never heard this story ever before, ever, ever, ever. No one's ever had that thought when a movie didn't do well that movie theaters are completely and totally dead. We've never had this conversation. It's never happened on the podcast, which is all sarcasm. It happens every year. Every year. Some years it's a little bit more intense than like this year. I feel like it's more in the narrative. Everybody's kind of talking about it. A couple years ago, they said the same thing. 2020, they're completely gone. Before that, or superhero movies are so good was the conversation that they were going to destroy movie theaters. As soon as Netflix started popping up, Netflix will destroy movie theaters. That was 12 years ago.
The DVD, the VHS.
So, yeah, people are talking about because Mad Max didn't do great its opening weekend. It was it did bad. It's one of the worst Memorial Day weekends ever.
But it is the first Mad Max movie to open number 1. So technically, that's a win.
I mean,
if you want to make it more positive.
What was Fury Road going up against? Do you know?
I do
When
know.
did Fury Road come out?
It came out, I believe it was May or June of 2015, and I believe it only grossed 40 million. Like, for people saying that Furiosa did really bad on Memorial Day weekend, one of the worst weekends for movie going, and they think like that's the barometer of saying that movies are dying, when 10 years ago at like the peak of like box office grossing and Mad Max still only made 40 million on its opening weekend, like I don't think that's quite the right barometer to give like the headlines that movies and the theater industry and all this stuff is dying, you know?
Yeah, and we got to put some things into context. So Mad Max came out in what?
15, right?
2015? I can't find it on what I'm looking at the moment. Is that correct? 2015?
I'll look it up on mine, see if I can find it, but I am pretty sure it was at least 14 or 15, because that was like one of the best years for movies, in my opinion, and Mad Max was a big reason why.
2015, you're right.
Yeah.
So Mad Max, look, Mad Max cost $150 million to make. It made $379 million worldwide. You count in marketing, that's actually not a huge profit. No. I do understand where people are coming from, because I think this is the worst just Memorial Day opening for any movie in like 60-something years. That, I understand where some of these headlines are coming from. That makes sense. But I think we need to look at the broader context of, when Solo came out in May, the narrative was Star Wars is completely and totally dead. Oh my gosh, nobody wants to see Star blah, 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 blah. And you got to remember the context. It came out 2 weeks or 3 weeks after Endgame. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? Or it was Infinity War. It might have been Infinity, but either of them. What? Mm-hmm. What? Why are you even doing that? Look, this entire month has been completely packed. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes did really well. Has been doing well at the box office. That's a movie that I heard casuals around me. I'm only surrounded by casual moviegoers now these days, unless I'm talking to this guy or somebody in our little group. But I heard so many people being like, I want to go see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I want to go see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. You look at movies like If, which also bombed, but it's a bigger movie, right? It's got a name behind it. John Krasinski, people like him in his movies, right? You got to look at the time period. I don't get this idea that summer starts in May. I don't understand it. And I'm speaking just as somebody who is in schools with teachers, because May is when parents are spending all of their money at graduations, getting ready for the end of the year, the parties, the celebrations. Parents are spending all of their time and attention right there. They're more concerned with the barbecue than a movie on Memorial Day weekend. Like, that's just how it is. I've never understood, especially, maybe the beginning of May I'll give you, but at the end of May, they're busy. You want to give a good 2 weeks out. First couple weeks in June is when you should start dropping some of these, because that has flatlined. We've gotten a paycheck back. Kids are out of school for the most part. Most schools are done in June. Handful of states go a little later, but I've never understood this. Like, I like what I don't know. I do
It's
also get the point that Dune had a little bit of an effect, right? Dune was big and huge. People look at Furiosa and they're like, "Oh, sand again." Some people are like, "I'm not going to go see." I get that to a degree. I think that does play a factor, whether it's small or big. But sorry,
I
go
think
ahead.
I was just gonna add. I also think that the Mad Max movies in general, I think audiences, casuals, think it looks weird. You know what I mean? Like they probably think it looks cool, kind of, but it just looks weird to them, like too weird to go out to see. I mean, I'm sure the same thing happened
Sure,
with Fury Road 2. Like, we are head over heels for this type of stuff. Like, we'll see any movie, we'll see anything that looks like a little weird or a little different or looks cool to us, but most other people don't act like that. So if they're really trying to be picky about like, or not picky, but if they're trying to be wise about how to spend their money, and then they see that this movie's coming out, maybe they decide just to skip it because it just looks too weird to invest the money into.
yeah,
Possibly, unfortunately, but I
I
don't think
agree
that's
with
a big
you,
stretch. Yeah.
and I think it is true. Inflation's bad.
Yeah,
Shrinkflation's hit. Like
definitely.
everything's expensive. The movie theaters are expensive to go to. Every time I see someone talk about how expensive it is, I click on a reply or the comments just to see what other people say, and I see the same thing every time. AMC Plus is $25 a month, and if you just go 3 times, like you're making your money back. Blah blah blah. Regal's got a everybody's always finding a way to be like, no, go to the movies. It's always the hard movie goers that are not thinking fairly. It is expensive. When
Yeah.
I saw Furiosa, we went to IMAX and we made it a date night. We wanted to do dinner and the big
Hmm.
thing. It cost me about $100. I mean
Yeah.
that includes the tickets and everything, and the tickets were cheaper. I got them because I do have AMC Plus, so I got
Hmm.
IMAX tickets for the same price as a regular ticket with that, which is great. But I still, but that's also on me. We got beer. I had to get a flatbread. Flatbreads are they're pretty tasty.
It's so
Get a
strange
large.
how movie theaters to the public seem more like a luxury to spend on, when in the past it used to be like almost a normal thing to spend on.
Yeah,
Because almost everywhere you go out to is almost equally expensive and not more. But yet I would argue that more people probably go out to eat, for example, and don't think of that as like necessarily a luxury over going to the theater.
sure. I think that's fair. I think that's a
Yeah.
fair thing. I don't know if that's everybody, but I definitely think that's a factor. There's a lot of factors that go into this
There's
this
not
end of
one
the year
thing for
debate.
sure. Yeah.
No. Um I was looking at it. Mad Max, when its first official day in the domestic box office, made $16 million. It never made more than that. It made 16 the next day. So that opening weekend would have put it around 20, 30, what's that? What is that? 16, 16, we're at what, 20 or 32,
And you're meaning the
40,
first one, right?
40. Yeah, Mad Max
Okay.
Fury Road. I'm talking Fury Road,
Okay.
not the original Mad Max.
Gotcha. Okay.
They're making more than this, but that's almost a good chunk, a good quarter of its
Hmm.
entire domestic gross. It made more internationally, and I also don't understand why people aren't talking about how has Furiosa released in every international market already.
Oh, I have no idea.
Let me look.
I'm an
I got her up
American.
right here. It's already made $71 million worldwide.
Mm,
Box Office Mojo doesn't have the budget at this moment. They don't do that, I think, anymore. I think you have to subscribe to IMDb Pro to get all that info,
yeah,
but
probably.
which I don't. But
Hmm.
it made 10 million Friday, 8, and then 7 on Sunday, 6 on Memorial Day. It steadily went down, but it's only it's only been out a week. Fury Road was out. I was just looking at it, released in May on May 15th, and it didn't leave theaters till September 24th.
Hmm.
That's also a factor because streamers have pulling their movies quicker with the new deals and everything. I mean, Fall
Yeah.
Guy didn't do well at the box office right after Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and see that to me is the mistake. They just spent their money. Most people get paid on a 2-week basis.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you're thinking, okay, 2 weeks later they got their paycheck, it's like, well, take into the time of year. It's spring. People are out doing stuff. Their first time going outside. Do you think they want to go into the movie theater when they just spent all winter doing that? No, it's not the very first thing they want to do. You got to wait for everything to get hotter and hotter. Then people
Hmm.
want to go into the theaters. So I
Um,
just go ahead.
I do want to remind people of like the new windowing rules. Because that's a really good point that you brought up. It used to be that movies would usually have an exclusive 90-day window at the theaters before a few months later you would see them arriving on physical media. Now, post-COVID, that has changed to where the majority of studios have gotten the window to shrink to 30 to 45-day windows, which isn't great, but it's fair enough because I think we've seen that movie going has changed so much to where that shorter of a window is a bit more warranted. But unfortunately, one studio in particular, Universal, who just released The Fall Guy, so this is a great example, they have their rules set a bit differently to where if a movie grosses over 50 million on its opening weekend, then it's going to stick to the 30 to 45-day format. But if it makes less than that on its opening, then it's a 17-day window, and then it goes straight to PVOD. So that's why we saw Fall Guy go there as quickly as we did.
You can rent it right now for $20.
Yeah, which I think that rule should be adjusted by Universal. I think that instead of a 50 million opening weekend, it should be more of like a 30 million opening weekend, which Fall Guy still wouldn't make that cut. It made like 28 or something like that. But I'm just saying that we are now seeing a shift to where the 50 million opener, or I guess more so the 100 million opener, isn't like the norm. It was definitely the norm in like the tens. And I think the industry and the publications and even movie fans still think that we are still in the tens, but we're not anymore. We are not going to be at that moment to where every other weekend it feels like there's $100 million opening. The realistic expectations now should be 20 to 40 million openings, as we're seeing with the likes of Fall Guy and Furiosa. And luckily, Kingdom Planet of the Apes made over 50 million opening. That's great. That's an exception, but I don't think that's the rule anymore. It's like we're being set back into like more of the 90s of movie going, where there wasn't an opening of like over 100 million. It was more so in like the 40, 50 million range, with the exception being of as high of 80 million, I think. Like, I think The Lost World was the highest grossing movie, or sorry, was the highest opening of like the 90s with like 75 million, something like that. And the first 100 million opening was Spider-Man, if I recall. Like, that was only 20 years ago. So I just think with everything going on currently, expectations throughout the industry, and with movie fans in general freaking out that movies are dying, they're not dying, but everyone just needs to reset their expectations of the industry. This is our new norm. We're almost like going back to the 90s in a weird sense.
I had it backwards. It went Fall Guy, then Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Mm-hmm. But I want to look at this. Fall Guy came out on May 3rd, same weekend as the Phantom Menace re-release, which did well. Did really well. And I get that the studio probably was like, only the hardcore nerds will go to that, and it ended up being a lot more than that. It made quite a bit of money. I thought it was first that weekend, wasn't it?
Planet of the Apes? No.
No. Fall Guy or Star Wars, the Phantom Menace re-release beat Fall Guy, right? I'm pretty sure Star Wars Phantom Menace was the biggest movie of that weekend in terms of box office gross.
I think Fall Guy still got first, but Phantom Menace was not far behind.
But that's the same audience right there. That's taking people.
Maybe. I think Fall Guy was a bit more general audience.
Sure, but again, nobody expected this movie to get that level of money.
Phantom Menace? No,
not on that re-release.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's still, I mean, there's similar target demographics, whether it's a new or old Star Wars movie.
Okay.
That was on May 3rd. 7 days later, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes comes out. 7 days. People were more hyped about that than Fall Guy.
Mm-hmm.
They were more hyped about it. Then you get If. Then you get Furiosa on the 24th. You get If 10 days later. So, not only 7. They were all a week apart from each other. What are these studios doing? You picked crappy release dates. Don't complain. What are you doing? And you had Challengers right before that. That's going to take some money from people's pockets.
Challengers has been doing pretty well. And that's a good example of like letting your movie play out in theaters. Like, don't worry about the opening numbers. See if you have a good response. See if you have good word of mouth. See if you made a really good trailer, and see if that captures the audience interest as time goes on and more people hear about the movie.
I also And I'm gonna be honest, I have not seen Fall Guy. I didn't get a chance to go. I wanted to see it that weekend. We didn't even get to go to any movie. And then Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes a week later. That's what happens when you have all these bigger movies that you want people to see back to back to back. Of course, I'm going to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes over Fall Guy. It looked better, but I wonder how many people got Barbied too hard, and they see Ryan Gosling kind of just playing Ken, being himself, being goofy and funny, which he has been doing for years. But now he's kind of more popping. We saw it happen with Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds was in a bunch of big movies right after Deadpool that people thought were going to be the next real big thing with him, but people were kind of getting tired of seeing Ryan Reynolds a little too much, and now we haven't seen him in a while.
Maybe, but that movie, If, also, I don't think needs to be relied on Ryan Reynolds necessarily.
I'm not talking about If. I'm talking about Fall Guy.
No, I know, but like, oh, I thought I heard Ryan Reynolds' name. Never mind then.
I did say Ryan Reynolds, but I meant Gosling and Barbie for Fall Guy, and then Ryan Reynolds, yes, is in a movie like If, but he hasn't been in a bunch of major big movies as of late. You know, big theater.
Only Deadpool, yeah.
My point. When was Deadpool 2? 5 years ago?
5. In COVID years, 8.
And he came out in he had a free fall movie that was funny and fun. But it's, people do get tired of the shtick. I'm saying these are all factors. Everything we're saying is a small percentage of why it's not going the way it is. The fact that these movies released a week apart is a problem. You expect movie-going audiences to go see Fall Guy, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and If, and then Furiosa back to back to back to back with it every week? There's no way that's possible. These are studios that thought If's more family-friendly, so it's going to be there. I can't tell you how many kids I saw in my Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes movie.
That's crazy.
Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Studios got to rethink. Yeah. They got to rethink their plan, unless you're Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, because they knew they had the best movie by a mile. Not by a mile, because Furiosa is great.
They need to rethink their scheduling tactics, and they also need to rethink their box office tactics and their budget tactics, because, like, again, we're just not in the tens anymore. Like, we're just not. Like, we're not. Maybe we'll come back one day to where we get like $100 million opening movies, or like seeing so much success through like the money, but that's just not what we're in right now.
But let's also look at the 2010s. What were those movies? Kyle, what were they? Which movies were the ones that were consistently making $100 million opening weekend consistently all the time? What kind of movies were they?
Mainly they were Disney sub-brands, but they would be the Star Warses or the superhero Marvel movies.
So let's look at Marvel. Marvel is at that time, and I mean still is a TV show. Watching the next episode impacted the episode before and gives you a preview of the next episode. Everything they built a system that really worked, and as soon as the movie started failing, now it's not working. People wanted to go see it. All of these characters, it was their first time. That oversaturation is hit. Same with DC. DC just kept trying and failing over and over and over, doing the same thing. But they were all these huge things that were hitting nostalgia for a lot of parents, that were good for, something kids could enjoy, and that people in the middle also could find enjoyment in. Those aren't hitting. And when you look at all the movies, I bet that came out in between those that were bigger budgeted, but not those brands that did well, I bet you a lot of those reasons are, we've seen a lot of superhero movies lately, wanted something different. Look at A Quiet Place. Quiet Place, horror, like nice little small horror movie that popped really well during that time because of something like that. Or any of Jordan Peele's movies in those 2010s.
And I was looking at the top, like, box office, I think it was like box office openings, or maybe it was just the totals in general of the 2010s, and the majority of them were like the Disney products, with the exception of like a Jurassic World, for example. But I think as we're feeling the oversaturation of like the Marvel and the Disney brands, I also feel like in doing so, that also means we're feeling an oversaturation of like brands in general. Although that's also tough to like say if that's necessarily true, because we're still seeing like Planet of the Apes or a Godzilla X Kong still being able to do well in theaters. Like there's still like audiences. It's a weird tug of war that like audiences are facing right now, to where I think they do think that they want to have original stories, but yet when they come with the choice of like original versus IP and familiar, I think they do go with the IP and familiar. And maybe it's because of inflation, or maybe it's because they're just liars and they want to see something familiar over something new. I don't know, but it's a weird state that we're in right now, and I do think like it's as a result of the oversaturation of or feel or just being completely over like what we had in terms of like movies in the tens. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm looking up the movies that I'm just looking at kind of the yearly calendar gross for domestic box office. So 2010,
Well,
Avatar,
yeah,
right? 2011, Harry Potter, The Deathly Hallows, massive franchise coming to an end.
right.
Avengers,
Mhm.
first Avengers, Iron Man 3, again, Guardians of the Galaxy, all connected. Those are all part of a TV show. Jurassic World, first time a beloved franchise comes back. Finding Dory, franchise, Disney.
Yeah.
Star Wars The Last Jedi, huge franchise, already has a fan base. Black Panther and Endgame, and then Bad Boys for Life to cap it off at 2020. So like that I mean, that's exactly right. It were franchises that had established fan bases from whatever years, whether it's comics or the original Star Wars trilogy or Pixar, things
An
like
old
that.
movie that
Yeah.
did well because
Harry
it was
Potter.
unfamiliar.
Harry Potter. I mean, we
Yeah.
forget how freaking big Harry Potter
No,
was when it was
wasn't
coming
that long
out.
ago, but yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, like the young kids to have no idea. They make fun of all the millennials, but they got no clue how big Harry. Man, I remember midnight screenings for that. I've seen a lot of that too. People think that theaters need to bring back midnight screenings. That's
No.
a big thing because it builds up hype. I don't know
People
about
don't
that.
want to go back to begin with. Why do they want to go at midnight? Like, what are you talking about?
I enjoyed my midnight screenings as a teen and in college, and we didn't even really have many of them in college, but because they had already started phasing them out. But the ones I enjoyed in high school and stuff, like those were great in high school. But that's a demographic. Like you're not going to get older people, families. They're not going to be doing that all the time, and there's not enough big projects to get there. I mean, you look at this, and you let's see from 2000 up. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Harry Potter, Sorcerer's Stone, Spider-Man. There's your first superhero, like big superhero movie, right? Isn't the first Spider-Man considered kind of? I guess you got Batman, in the '90s and stuff, but
like that
for the
one
2000s
to 100 million, which was unheard of.
Yeah,
and it sparked. I think it was like a big spark. Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah. You got Finding Nemo. Then you got Shrek 2, Revenge of the Sith. Again, big. All of these, even then, are franchises. Harry Potter had such a huge fan base because those books were so popular by this time. Then you got Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Disney didn't expect this to be the franchise it was, but they're happy it ended up being it. Spider-Man 3, The Dark Knight, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen, and then back to Avatar in 2010. So, I mean, you can go all the way back to 1977, and I just keep seeing superheroes. Star Wars, Superman, Star Wars, Back to the Future. I guess that's not superhero, but let's see. Batman.
It was the original
Batman, Jurassic Park. There's Disney with The Lion King, not King Kong. Batman Forever. There's a lot of superheroes in there. And then every now and then you get a Titanic and an Avatar from James Cameron. He just sneaks on in there. And there's a couple Top Guns in there as well. But yeah, this is what looking at this is what it's been since 1977.
Yeah, you do need franchises. You do need IP for sure. George. Like it's helpful for everyone for this industry. As much as as much as we still champion like original stuff, and that's healthy to watch original stuff too. It does need like some familiarity to help thrive. That's for sure. I am glad that you mentioned that thing about movie theaters and like needing to bring back midnight screenings, because I agree. I don't think that's the thing to have audiences come back to movie theaters, but I do think that movie theaters themselves do need to re-strategize like what their building needs to have in them. Because we are seeing, in my opinion, less movies coming to theaters to begin with due to studios also putting stuff on streaming. Like they are just separating their movies a lot more now than what they did years ago. So as they get less movies and as they're starting to realize that there's a chunk of the audience that isn't coming back since the COVID days to theaters, that means they're having less people coming to the theaters in general. Minus the exception of like a Dune 2, probably. So I think that movie theaters should start re-strategizing on like the space that they have in their building. Maybe there comes a reality where they have to take out a few of their screens if they have a lot of screens in their theater, whether it's like a chain or whether it's, independently owned and they have like, I don't know, 5 or 6 screens, for instance. Maybe you take out a few of those screens, open up those rooms and, use it for like live entertainment, or maybe use it for, I don't know, bowling or axe throwing, or maybe you or make a deal with like a small or another independent restaurant or bar or something like that, to where both of you guys can collaborate and use that space to have your audiences come see a movie, but also have like a dine-in experience at the same time. Like
I got one for you. Here's what you do.
Yeah.
You take 2 theaters, you turn them into 2 escape rooms that are themed on the big movies of that week.
Yeah, sure.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you could go that route too. I just think that unfortunately people still want movies. People still want to go out and see the movies. I do believe that. But I
think 2020 proved that. I think people thought it was dead, and I think 2020, Top Gun, all those proved that they do enjoy going to the theater. But it needs to be a little bit less expensive, and you need to offer a lot of options. It does need to be less expensive.
Exactly. The less expensive thing is true, but it's like every other business, unfortunately, that's dealing with this same thing. Like the inflation is so bad and everything is just so bloated that they have to keep up, unfortunately. Like, that's just the unfortunate reality. I hope there comes a time to where that stops and, everything goes down, of course, but that's just the unfortunate reality that we're wasting. So I don't really blame theaters and most businesses in general of like what's going on right now. Minus like, some of the corporations, they're just greedy jerks to begin with.
Let's really dive into some of these things though, because I find it interesting. This is the part I really enjoy. Okay. Kyle lives by a Regal. I grew up at that Regal as well, but I have not really been to one other than the 2 Oppenheimers I saw in 75 millimeter. But I now go to AMC, which before I was going to a Cinemark. Let's start with the big ones. Okay. AMC, right? They offer a 3-tier subscription plan if you want to pay for an AMC Plus, right? I pay for the top dog. I'm paying $25 a month, but I get 3 tickets a week that I get base price for. It's just a regular ticket, but I can see Dolby, I can see IMAX at that price. I can do all these things, and I go to the movies often enough to warrant it, because I will see a few movies every week. I mean, I average about a movie and a half at the theater a week or something like that, 2 movies a week. So that's great. They do a discount Tuesday. I believe most chains do a discount Tuesday.
Yeah.
I know Cinemark did. And they have like a priority line. They have, they've got some dine-in experiences where they'll bring you your food. There, handful of places have bars. They've got style, better food, real restaurant style food. So those are kind of the things I'm thinking of. And then they've got sometimes throwbacks. Those are kind of the big things. Is there anything that Regal does differently, or does something else that maybe AMC isn't? Because I think Cinemark does pretty much the same stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything else?
No, Regal does do things quite a bit differently. Instead of giving you good seats, they give you really crappy ones that feel like you're sitting on planks of wood.
Especially yours.
Let's see. Instead of good food, they give you bad food. So that's another thing. Instead of walking through a bathroom, you're walking through a lake because all the toilets are overflowing. So that's a nice bonus.
All right. Get this guy out. No, I'm just let's hear.
Regal sucks,
but they do. They are the worst. But let's talk about the things to go to. Like, you also live in a small town with like the Regal I went to with the big old IMAX has great food, great bar, all this stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And their
yeah.
IMAX was still like it was kind of like the IMAX we went to back in the day up in Yellowstone. Yes, you heard that right. Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah, it's really nice one.
But not nearly as nice as the one we just went to for Furiosa. Oh my
I'm
gosh,
sure,
that
but
AMC. But what did
in
they
terms
do
of
to get
Montana-
people to try to get people in? Like what are they doing? What is the tier system or the subscription they have, or like what is all that stuff now?
I have Regal Unlimited, so I don't look at I haven't looked at like their tier system in a long time. I finally went with like the unlimited one, which I believe is like $20 a month. It does about and basically it's like they advertise it as like 2 trips to the theater and you're basically paid for like all the movies that you're seeing, which is accurate. For someone like me that went every week this month, it was more than worth the trip. Well, was
There
more
you
than
go.
worth the price.
Do they do discounts? Like I think I also get
Yeah.
discounts and I get $5 rewards every time I see a theater. I get like a certain amount of
I don't
points.
remember them all, but they're about like that. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you look at the independent theaters. And I know some of the independent theaters I've been around in my day have done here in Philly. They do a lot of BYOB, bring your own beverage, bring a beer, just, maintain to yourself. Let's watch a throwback. Let's watch whatever's new these days. They do some events. Every now and then the big chains do events or throwbacks. But here's what they need. Honestly, here's what they need to be doing. They need to be looking at YouTube more, and the theater, especially the big chains, should be looking and taking big events. Gamer, when esports teams are battling it out, stream it in the theater. I know gamers up the wazoo who would pay money to sit with the popcorn, hang with their friends in a theater where the environment's a little different, right? In that type of situation, if you're watching a live event, you're going to be able to talk a little bit more. It's not that same style. That's another reason the theaters are struggling is because people have horrible theater etiquette these days. Horrific theater etiquette.
Worse. Yeah,
brain rot. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. That is
real.
But, what I think they need to be doing stuff like that. Do a night where you just say, hey, we're, I think they need to lower the price of renting the theater. It's like $250 to rent the movie theater's smallest movie theater. Make it $50. Let you bring all your friends. Do game nights where you can bring or buy old Xboxes, PlayStations, GameCubes, Wiis, and allow people to hook them up and play on this massive screen. Are you kidding me? I know people that would pay money to do things like that. Go 1v1 on Rust back in the old Call of Duty days in a movie theater. Take turns, have your friends there to play zombie, things like that. That would get you in. They also need to lean more into these anime movies. That when they get here, man, do they make money. I'm going to one tomorrow. They make money. You've got to look at the times.
That's definitely more of like an opening weekend type thing when it comes to the animes. I think they have huge drop-offs usually by the second week.
Yeah, but that's a weekend that is there for the theater. That's for the theater, not even for the big studios that take all this, half your money. That is more money in your pocket to be doing these things.
Yeah, I don't know. And it also varies on, I think, the studio that has the anime movie as well. Because I think there are lots of cases to where they don't make nothing of it because they forget that the anime audience is big and they won't release the movie to the widest amount of theaters possible.
Sure.
So that also could be an issue. Is just because of how the studio handles the distribution of the movie rather than the theaters themselves.
Yeah.
Just for a little bit more context on that.
Studios should also, I think big companies and the studios, the big movie theater chains and the big studios should do like with Star Wars, promote a big event. People are watching your streaming platforms. It's not going to cost you anything to promote that event on those platforms.
The movie itself.
Do a horror night. Put all of these movies back in theaters. Do special events. Do things where people can go relive things, right? Play on nostalgia. And then here's the biggest thing. Okay, here's the biggest thing at the end of the day. And they are doing this. Furiosa is an example of this. But in a world where we are living without a lot of new and original stuff and the nostalgia factors kind of hitting, in the words of George Lucas, nobody's making creative, original things anymore. He was in an interview like 3 days ago, and he was asked about the state of movies and why people think they're failing, and he said, because people aren't creative. It's all the same stuff, which that's fine. In the 2010s, there was a lot of that. A lot of the same superhero movies, a lot of these same movies, but in between you had Get Out. You know, you have all these other movies that are so good and creative and awesome that allowed for breaks from those things. You need those movies, but you also do need to have something creative. Pixar is the one I think that's driving me the most bonkers. They are, and Disney with their animation, they have the most power to make creative and great movies. They've been doing it for decades, and they have just completely slammed the brakes. Turning Red is great. Elemental's very good.
Luca's really good.
Luca's very good, and I understand 2020 impacted that a lot of Turning Red and Luca especially, but
chances, yeah.
And they are great. No, they're not a Nemo, right? They're not some of these real heavy hitters. We need to get one or two of those out. Maybe let them be creative. Really dive in.
That just goes back to what I was saying, though. Like, audiences, I think, are fickle these days to where they say they want more original stuff, but yet we see the likes of, like, a Monkey Man. No one went to see Monkey Man, but everyone went to see Godzilla X Kong. Like, I think even themselves, they just are unsure of, like, what they really want. And also with, like, the money thing, they just are saying to themselves, I'd want original, but I also don't want to spend a lot of money on something that I haven't, like, experienced or watched before. Like we are at a very odd, like, mixed point of, like, what we really want to see out of our movies. I feel like it gives me hope slightly when I see the things such as Civil War and Challengers, to where those are the more original stuff that we've had this year that the general public has experienced, more so than, like, niche smaller movies that are a bit smaller than Challengers and a Civil War.
Challengers helps because Zendaya is
yeah,
her,
that helps. But the movie's also very good. Like, I'm just saying, like, I do have hope that maybe lessons can be learned out of those movies, especially those movies that were able to stay long time in theaters and were able to show that they were able to have, like, interest in a cultural hit, where people ended up talking about them for weeks. But I don't know. But then again, I see, like, the headlines that you're seeing of, like, Pixar wants to make not Finding Nemo 5, and it's like, it's not bad to have sequels, it's not bad to have IP, but we just need a healthy balance again. We need a healthy balance of creativity again.
And don't run back to ones hit, right? We're getting Inside Out 2, which I think looks really great, and I've heard people around me
with its audience
talk about it. That makes sense, but at the same time, it's like, we don't need Toy Story 5, 6, 7, and 8. Make something new. And to your point about Challengers and Civil War, I think this is part of the reason that the Planet of the Apes franchise is as good as it is, because I think Kingdom is very different than the other three movies. It's very different. It's a very different story that is bringing a fresh, new take to a beloved franchise. That's what they're missing. That's what DC is doing everything in their power with James Gunn to do right now.
Right.
And that's what Marvel is every day fighting over in their board meetings. That's what you need too. Fresh, new takes on the nostalgia while having those newer stories also be coming out and supported.
Yeah. I just am so tired of seeing us stuck wanting to regurgitate things that were good in, like, the 2000s. You know, like, I'm tired of hearing Shrek 5 may happen, Toy Story 8 may happen. Like, I am so sick of not being able to move forward. Like, I hope a movie like If captures, like, this new audience of young kids, and they're able to have, like, their own, like, kids movie that can grow. And
If it's just Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends from the 2000s. But at least he just stole the idea.
At least it's theirs. Like, it's not the best example, but I'm just saying, like, I am so tired of like being nearly 30 years old and seeing like Toy Story 8 in the works. Like, I don't need that anymore. I am okay with moving on and watching different things. And I wish everyone else was the same way, but I don't know. It's just
Well,
maybe it's just different for me, but I just
well, I'm going to tell you, Kyle. The people that there are people that agree with you. They're probably close to our age. The people that did agree with you are older than you and already had this complaint when the prequels came out. And when they rebooted another Batman, and when they did, they've already had their time to complain. It's your time, buddy. It's your time, okay? It's your time to complain. It's your time to be the grumpy old man. Soon you're not going to care anymore, because then eventually they will stop doing it, and then they will do it again, and then you'll be back.
Yes, it is. It is a cycle of things, absolutely. And maybe it's just me being more me realizing like how the world really works, so maybe I'm just more noticeable to these types of things. But I just feel like, especially nowadays, it's just, especially at like a very high peak of like frustration when it comes to what people are trying to figure out what they want, and yet we're still stuck in like this, in this, you know what I mean, of what I'm describing.
Kevin Costner agrees with you, so he spent his own money to make a movie that is apparently horrible. So, there you go.
Hey, at least he did it.
Hey, that's what people said about George, and he spawned the franchise that has caused all these issues. George made an independent movie. He made an independent movie, and that movie, he's like, I'm just going to make my movie. I hate the studios. I'm going to make my movies my way, and he caused the whole thing. He's the reason we have this issue, and guess what, George? Thank you, because I'd rather complain right now and have the Star Wars I love. I would really not give up Star Wars to have gotten rid of what's going on now. You kidding me? Just rewatch really the original trilogy. Bang. Yeah. Kidding me?
Yeah.
Okay, I get what
you mean.
Yeah, George, that's who we need. Let's be honest. George is the hero we need. Start something new, George. We know you've been making weird little creative movies for the last 10 years. On your ranch. He said as much. He's like, I'm gonna make movies that no one will ever see, just me and my friends. George, put one of them out. I know you got a couple bangers.
He's like, I'm looking at that once, and
George,
I never want that again.
George, we know you got it. Put it out. And it helps.
Are you a coward?
We're also in a transition wave, right? Tarantino is making his last movie, right? Marty, Steven, they're up there in age. They're still cranking out some bangers, but they're up there in age, right?
Apparently Coppola made the craziest banger of them all. So
crazy that people are like, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen, and others are like, this is the worst movie I've ever seen, which makes me just so freaking hyped.
Oh yeah. I am so craving for something just so baffling, bananas, over something that's so tame and lame. Like, I agree. If that movie ever comes out, I am so there for it. Like, I am so watching.
It's coming out one day.
You
don't put a trailer out if you don't got something.
It was a power move. He's trying to make people get the interest.
Probably.
Yeah.
Movie theaters. Look, this whole conversation is like The Wall in Game of Thrones. Granted, the show ended poorly, and spoiler, the wall did come down, but nobody in the series believed the wall would fall until the wall actually, they witnessed it fall. They knew it fell. They got reports that it fell. I'm not going to believe the theaters are... look, AMC went bankrupt. Regal went bankrupt. And the whole narrative was theaters are completely and totally dead, and they are still kicking. Are they continuing to send out losses? Yep. I'm not going to believe it until I go to my local theater and I am told you won't get to watch any movies anymore. We're shutting every theater down.
Yeah.
Then I'll be like, oh, the movies have died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? We got through a pandemic, and that includes the movie industry. Like, movies did not just go away from the cultural zeitgeist during the pandemic. Now, granted, it may not be at the top of cultural priorities as like a lot of other things are now, such as like internet culture, social media culture, all sorts of other things, to where people like have moments and gather together. I mean, look at the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake that just happened. Like that was almost a moment of its own, right?
It
Movies may
was.
not
No,
be
it
at
was
like
its own moment.
yeah, movies aren't like at the top that they once were. I get that, but they're not dead. Like people still want to experience movies. It just may not be in the same way that it once was, whether it's from the 90s, as I mentioned, or whether it was from the 10s in that long rant that I had earlier. But movies are still around. They're still going to be around.
Yeah.
I hope that they're still around
anywhere.
for movie theaters, but I do believe if movie theaters can still just like do a bit of pivoting and do a bit of strategizing, similar to how everywhere else in the industry also has to do some pivoting and re-strategizing, movies are going to be around. It's like Alex, until I see them actually dead, I'm not going to believe they're dead.
Yeah, it's also like this is the same. The people that are shouting like movie theaters are dying, and they keep doing it, who really just want clicks, but
Sure.
that keep doing it. It's the same argument. Those are the same people that are like that say, that keep saying Hayao Miyazaki is going to pass away, now. Like he can't. Like Steven Spielberg's old, so he can't do anything anymore. Let's act as if he's dead. He's still making
They're
bangers.
ageist.
They are. And it's the same energy though with the right.
Mm-hmm.
How about we enjoy what we have while we have it, and if it gets taken away, we'll mourn it then. Buy a couple physical media DVDs while you're at it, just in case it happens. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. All right, we got to get out of here. I got to get going.
Let's do it,
guys. What did you think of our combos? Comment below. Let us know. I'm going to like, subscribe, and share. And thank you, my patrons. And as always, thanks for watching, Mom.
See you guys.